Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Russian reset, and our focus is going to be on an area called the White City in and around Moscow, as well as a bit later in the video we'll be talking about some architects from the United States and some of their buildings. So let's get started. Now, just for a little background about Russia itself, turns out most people think that Russia is a very old state, but 95% of their cities were actually founded in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, and there are virtually no written documents pertaining to Moscow prior to the 1600s. So its history isn't as old as probably most people think, but they've been doing a lot of construction on the roads in and around Moscow, and they've been finding all sorts of structures as well as artifacts. They've created an exhibition at the Museum of Moscow of some of these artifacts, including these 18th century vases, as well as 16th century ceramics. And one more artifact that I was intrigued by actually was they found these tombstones, immaculately preserved 17th century tombstones with German inscriptions. And I might go into that in a future video, but so they're finding all kinds of stuff, which is interesting. So I just wanted to give a little bit of that background. And now I want to get into this area called the White City. And it's highlighted in yellow here. And it's really a fortress and settlement comprising the third defensive belt around Moscow. And we're told it was built in the late 1500s of stone walls, and fortifications were important in providing defense for Moscow. And it wasn't until the 1770s and 80s that its walls and defensive towers were taken down and replaced by boulevards. Now, I'm going to question that, but before I do, they uncovered more recently another portion of this White City and just more excavations on this other street, some more white stone arches. But the last time archaeologists came into contact with the White City underneath Tverskaya Street was during construction of an underground passage in the 1970s. So apparently we have Catherine the Great to thank for the destruction of the White City. The White City, named for the color of its bricks, was destroyed under Catherine the Great, and she replaced it with wide boulevards. This is just an example of one of these boulevards pictured in 1917 and depicted in 1825. Now, it's my speculation that as opposed to these fortifications, these walls being taken down intentionally, I think they were destroyed during a massive event that is not in our history. And I think it's just being attributed to Catherine the Great. And some things that may point to that, just a couple of examples. The city in the Netherlands, so Western Europe, there's this city center called Groningen. And at one point it was one of these star cities. And there are maps from the 1600s that depict features like this well, which was a few feet above ground, above grade. And during more recent excavations, it's now 3 or 4 feet below grade. And that's one example. And then we can go to United States, Charleston, South Carolina. Again, another walled city. And after America got its independence, it was decided to bury all these fortifications and build on top of this city, and some of these walls go down 9 feet. So you have the same thing playing out in Moscow, but it's explained away as intentionally destroying these things and burying them. Now, there's another pattern that happens, and that is after these settlement sites, after they get buried, what gets built on top are this Greco-Roman architecture. And these are some examples in Charleston and back in the Netherlands. It just seems to be this overarching pattern. Well, what happens in Russia under Catherine the Great? She brings in the neoclassical architecture, according to script. All this architecture arrived in Russia during the reign of Catherine the Great. So my view is that there was a major event that buried a lot of these sites, including Moscow or parts of Moscow, and even the United States and parts of Europe as well. And then all of these neoclassical architecture was built after that. And the history has been obscured, and we're given these cover stories to explain away this destructive event. That's just my view at this time, but I find it interesting. I usually can find this same pattern. So I just wanted to mention the White City and all this neoclassical architecture, just the same pattern that we see in different areas. And I also want to mention during more construction work from 2015 to 2018, I think it was in the fall of 2015, workers doing repair work on this one street, they found under a layer of asphalt this sort of herringbone pavement, this special type of laying out these bricks. And I've seen that in St. Petersburg, actually, and I've touched upon this in a video called Follow the Red Brick Road. But there's this summer gardens and palace of Peter the Great. And behind this structure, the ground is fairly level, and it's kind of hard to tell, but underneath these windows, there's this section, this gray strip. And I wanted to point that out because if you look at the same structure today, you can still see this gray strip, but what's been exposed now is it's a sunken garden now. So this whole area here has been basically excavated, and during that excavation, they uncovered more of this clinker brick, this herringbone pattern, but this is all being attributed to the 1700s here. So I just wanted to show that instance where they found it also in St. Petersburg. And something else they found in Moscow, unusual pavement grates with these light prisms. And this is something that we find all throughout North America as well. And of course, it's in Europe. But I guess I'm just a little more shocked when we find examples in Russia for some reason. But we're told it was manufactured in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was located under an asphalt layer and extremely rusted. But later in this article, they were just talking about in spring and autumn, rainwater would enter the basements through cracks in the grates. And in the winter, they'd be covered with snowdrifts, and the glass prisms would often be broken by people trying to break ice on the sidewalk. As a result, they were covered with this asphalt and forgotten for almost 90 years. That may be true, but the use of these prism lights and these grates might not be the best idea, but I just wanted to mention that. And we're going to take a bit of a detour here now away from Moscow, but this Luxfer Prism company who made a lot of these grates and with these prism lights, I guess they started in 1896, and then the use of these prism lights just spread all throughout Europe as well. And I came across a blog talking about a city in the Ukraine, and he was just talking about these lights, also referred to as vault lights, but they're usually associated with these ornate structures. And he just found a couple of examples. And this one in particular is located at the front entrance of one of the city's most interesting and unique buildings. So there seems to be some connection with the more ornate structures and these prism lights, at least in some cases. But yeah, there was also this German company that made these prism lights, and I guess it was founded in 1899, and it was a foreign branch of this Luxfer Prism company. And the story does seem to check out, but you never know. I'm not making any speculations either way, but at the very least, it's something very interesting. And the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright even designed one of these prism lights, so we are told anyway. And apparently he drew 41 designs for this company, and they only used one of them, and it was this particular pattern. But yeah, this company, I guess they were collaborating with some of the lead architects of the time, such as Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, as well as others. So that does give me some pause, because I know a lot of these architects we question. And when you look into this Louis Sullivan, some of his buildings, very ornate. But Frank Lloyd Wright had an interesting quote about this architect. Frank Lloyd Wright worked for this Louis Sullivan early in his career and called him his beloved master. But Louis Sullivan was apparently regarded as the spiritual father of modern American architecture. In this one building, I just want to touch on this because it's so ornate. And it doesn't look like much in this particular image, but it was built in 1895-6, and it still exists, I believe. But when you look at it up close, the facade is largely terracotta, and it's just so ornate. And I just kind of wanted to share some of these images, and we're going to get up closer on that. But just the floral look, the geometric patterns, the lines show up just amazing, like some of the molds that must have been used to create all this. But yeah, there's lines everywhere. And they even use some of these lines as water drainage, just like they do on some of these Gothic cathedrals with the gargoyles. But even the interior, some of the staircases, the doorknobs and handles, just super ornate, like just unreal. And I guess it was a 13-story building, and this is from the elevator. Unlucky 13, but things you don't see in our more modern age, but very interesting. And just to point out one more structure, he designed this Bayard Condic building in New York, and once again, heavy use of terracotta for the facade, and just more of the same. Angels, cherubs, some of these floral designs and geometric patterns, and more of the lions. Just really fun to look at anyway. So I just wanted to mention these architects' connection with that lighting company and touch on Moscow, the White City, the Reset. I just wanted to point this out, and I think I'll leave it here for today. I do want to give a big shout out to my channel members. Thank you for your help and support, and as well as my patrons. Really do appreciate all of your help. So thank you very much. And with that being said, until next time, take care. Bye.